Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us today. So welcome to this Crossref Metadata Health Check webinar, focusing on Open Journal Systems, also known as OJS. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization, and where you are in the world. Oh, wonderful. Hello, Mike. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. Wonderful. Okay, Amanda, if you'd go fast forward one slide. All right, so today's presenters from Crossref are Amanda French, Kathleen Luschik, and me, Rosa Clark. And thanks as well to Mike Nason and Patricia Lungus, if she's joining us today, and also our colleagues for the slide content. Here's what we're going to be covering today: why metadata is important, how to check your metadata's health with Crossref's participation reports, how to deposit your metadata with Crossref using OJS, and how to add and update specific metadata elements. You'll also have time at the end of the session to practice. So if you have access to your own OJS instance, feel free to pull that up now in preparation for working with your own system at the end. Please note that we will not be able to go over everything today, and we will not be able to answer all of the questions from participants. But we encourage you to ask your questions during the session, to read carefully through OJS documentation, to search for answers to your questions on the PKP forum and the Crossref community forum, and contact us after the session through our contact page on our website. We will add the links to the chat in just a moment. Just a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this session is going to be recorded. If you are not comfortable being on camera, feel free to turn your video off. You can use the chat to introduce yourself and to make any comments as we go. We will also be posting useful links there for you to follow. We will have some time to practice at the end, and during that time, you can use the reaction function to raise your hand if you'd like to share your experience real time. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat to ask questions. Ask at any time during this session, and someone will try to answer. You can also use the show captions during the session to show captions in any language. And please note that we do have a code of conduct for these sessions. Essentially, we encourage you to be kind and respectful to others during the session. And we do have a couple of polls that we'd like to kick off our session with. I'm going to launch the first one now. Oops, just a moment. All right, I believe this is it. Who here is already registering DOIs with us? Ben, was that the correct poll? Yes, it is not. Okay, we'll give it a try anyway, and then we'll find the correct poll. And if this isn't
the second one, but
yeah,
yes,
the second one.
correct
Okay.
poll. Yep.
Still some responses coming in. This is great. Nearly everyone has responded. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Take a look at the answers. Here are the results.
This is great. So a majority of you, 73%, are currently depositing metadata with Crossref using OJS. So we will go very briefly over how to do that in the session, but we will keep it short. And then hopefully in the practice session, we can work with you to set that up if you're not already doing it. Great.
Okay.
Next poll.
All right. All right. I think you're going to have to launch the next one. Yep. Nope. Hope that's the one we just had. Apologies. Let's see here. All right. Let's see. Nope, that's not it. So let's stop sharing that one.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back.
It
And
says
see.
a poll result is being shared, and so I can't do it. Sorry about this.
Okay, so let's,
Okay.
there you go. All right,
Thank you. Here we go.
All right, thank you.
Sorry about that. So this one is the first poll. Which version of OJS do you use? That's great. Rosa, you want to manage the poll?
Sure, let's give this a
Yeah,
try. I'll end this
maybe.
poll now. We'll share the results.
I think we are great. I find this really interesting. So we've got very much a almost even between 3.3 and 3.4, which is good. 38% are using 3.3, 33% of you are using 3.4. A few of you are not sure, and a few of you are using something else. Great.
All right. Good, good.
Okay. Yeah, that helps me know what to cover. And I think we've prepared well for those results. We already answered that question. And Rosa, are the results still being shared, or are they?
I stopped sharing the results.
Great, perfect. So with that, thank you, Rosa, for that introduction. My name is Amanda French. I work at Crossref as the Technical Community Manager for ROAR, the Research Organization Registry. We're going to talk about that a little bit in this session. But first of all, I wanted to go over just some basic concepts just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'll go through these quite quickly because I think most of you probably are familiar with these concepts. Always good to have a refresher. So first of all, in terms of OJS versions, version 3.3, which I think 33% of you are using, which is a very appropriate number, is the current long-term support version of Open Journal Systems. And what that means is it's the recommended version, and it's the actively supported version and will remain actively supported for 3 to 5 years after its release. Version 3.4, also a very good version, very good choice, makes DOI management, which we're going to talk about in this session, a core function of the platform instead of being managed by a plugin, and it introduces many other improvements as well. Version 3.5 is due out later this year, and one of the key things that does is to make ROAR, the Research Organization Registry, and ORCID IDs core function, ID management really, core functions of OJS instead of being managed by plugins. Version 3.5 will become the next long-term support version. And so that version 3.5 will then continue to be recommended and supported for 3 to 5 years until the next great versions of OJS come out. Please note that if you are using very early versions of OJS, pretty much anything before 3.1.2, functionally, you can't really deposit DOIs with Crossref. So we do encourage you to upgrade to some of these newer versions. These newer versions have wonderful metadata support and allow you to do a lot of fantastic things. Another term I wanted to go over a bit. What is a plugin? I'm sure you probably all know this, but a plugin is an optional software component that adds functionality to an existing extensible software platform. In the case of the Public Knowledge Project, which produces OJS, they have a development team which often builds plugins themselves, but the nice thing about a plugin architecture is that it allows third-party developers to create plugins that plug into that existing software to provide functionality that might not otherwise be there. And very often, as is the case for some of these metadata components, those plugins will become core functionality of the software. There are many wonderful plugins available for OJS, including several plugins we're going to talk about today that enable or enhance Crossref metadata deposit. Where can you find OJS plugins? OJS plugins that will work for your version of OJS can be found in Settings, Website Plugins. and they can be installed by site administrators. So you may be able to see on this screenshot here that in the sidebar, there's a menu option called administration that is circled in red. If you do not see that option, then you are not logged in as a site administrator and cannot install a plugin that is not already installed. So in that case, you might need to ask your site administrator to find and install some of the plugins we're going to talk about today. Many plugins, by the way, are already installed in just default versions of OJS. So in some cases, all you need to do is enable them. But let's talk about now what is metadata and why it's important. One of my favorite topics. So again, as probably most of you know, metadata is crucial information about an item, such as quite typically a journal article. We're all probably really familiar with bibliographic metadata, basic information such as the title of a journal article, the date it was published, contributor or author names, an abstract that summarizes what the article is about, and of course the DOI and or URL for where the article can be located. But I think what a lot of people don't always know is that there's a lot of additional metadata beyond bibliographic metadata that can be associated with a content item, and a lot of that metadata is what is stored in the DOI. So metadata has been described as a love letter to the future. It helps future scholars and systems, as well as today's scholars and systems, understand as much as possible about a work, where it came from, who was responsible for it, who funded it, and what can legally be done with it. So contributor information is really important. Who contributed to this article and what organizations are they associated or affiliated with? What other items is this item related to? What are its other versions, translations? What other items does it cite or reference? Where did this come from? Who publishes it? Who is responsible for it? Who funded the research that contributed to this article? And what grant was precisely responsible for the production of this article? Crossref offers a service called Crossmark, which we're not really going to go over today, but that's a very interesting set of information about updates to an article, including when an article is retracted or corrected. And there is also a lot of information about what are the license terms for this article? Can this article be used for automatic text mining? Can this article, what is the similarity check URL for this article? Similarity check is another service that Crossref provides that we're not going to go over in great detail today, but we're happy to talk more about that with you later. So many of you, I think, are Crossref members, and you're providing a really important service to the entire research community. You may or may not know that thousands, maybe millions of organizations and researchers use Crossref open metadata to find the content that you publish. Because Crossref's metadata is standardized and machine readable, it's very useful to many organizations that create tools and services that make your content more discoverable and more useful. These include author profile tools, manuscript tracking systems, library discovery services, search engines, metrics providers, and more. Crossref receives millions of queries per month from members and the research community across all our search interfaces. So as a Crossref member, you have an important role to play in enriching and preserving the global scholarly record. The richer the metadata that you provide to us, the better, and that'll be a theme that we'll continue to talk about throughout today's session. Rich metadata is really important to us for making connections between records. It's also important to keep the metadata record that you produce when you publish an item up to date. One clear instance of this is when the URL for an item or the landing page for an item changes, when it moves over time, and that can happen. Both OJS and Crossref can help you with keeping metadata up to date so that when someone clicks on a DOI, they will always go to an article or an article landing page. Remember too that each DOI should be displayed on a unique landing page for that published item. Unique landing pages should contain full bibliographic information, the DOI displayed as a URL, an easy way to access the full text of the content, even if the full text is behind a login or paywall. And one reminder is that it's not good practice to link a DOI directly to a PDF. Instead, the DOI should link to a landing page from which a link to a PDF is made available. And OJS in particular makes this very easy to do. It makes lovely landing pages that can be the landing page for your DOI. So let's talk a little bit again about something you probably all know, but we can go over a little bit more. Let's talk about DOIs, what they are and aren't. Obviously, a DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. A DOI is not an indicator of the quality of a publication or of the quality of the organization that registers the DOI, nor is it a mark of quality of the research that is published. A DOI is a persistent link, an identifier for a content item. It ensures that the content will always be available, as much as we can make sure, and that the scholarly record is complete. A DOI is composed of 3 sections. The red part is the resolver address. It's provided by the DOI Foundation. Each DOI is an identifier, but also an actionable link. And of course, for that, it needs a domain, such as doi.org. The blue section is what we call the DOI prefix, which is assigned to each member when they join. So you must be a Crossref member to receive a prefix. Many of you gave us your prefixes when you registered for this session. And the yellow part is what we call the suffix, which is the part of the part of the DOI assigned by the publisher. It's unique to each content item. Metadata and elements that we've been talking about and the relationships between them form a network. We call this network the research nexus, and it's our vision of a rich and reusable open network of relationships that connect research organizations, researchers, things, and actions. The foundation of the research nexus is metadata. The richer and more comprehensive the metadata in Crossref records, the more value there is for our members and for others, including for future generations. And I think this is important to note because many people associate Crossref only with DOIs, and DOIs is, of course, a large part of what we do, but it's important to understand and remember that Crossref is not just about DOIs. We're not defined by a particular service, no matter how important, but how we support the academic community as a whole. So our goal is to make the relationships that are abstractly depicted on this slide as rich as possible. Let's create more of them, and that's what the metadata that we're going to talk about today can do. Okay, so now we're going to go over some how-tos. I'm going to show you how to look up, how to do particular things in OJS. But before that, I'm going to talk a little bit about a really fun tool that we have here at Crossref that's completely open and free to use called participation reports. So Crossref participation reports are freely available on the web. They're available at crossref.org/members/prep. And what you can do here is look up any Crossref member to examine the quality of their metadata. So of course, we recommend that you, perhaps at some point after this webinar, look up your own name and see how good your metadata is. It's really kind of like a fun game. We can see here what the prep report, as we call them, looks like for eLife Sciences publications. Now, eLife does not use OJS, but they are wonderful metadata citizens. They provide a lot of metadata. So I just wanted to go through this screen to show you what's on here. So you can see this is the prep report for eLife Sciences publications. They're showing here nearly 12,000 registered content items in the upper right there. One key thing to note is that as you go down there are counts of preprints and journal articles, but notice that drop down there that is set to current content. So this is only showing right now eLife's current content. But you can set this drop down. This is what it defaults to. But you can set it to show all of its content or its backfile content. Now, current content is essentially defined as content within the current calendar year and the previous 2 calendar years. So this report, I actually think this screenshot was taken a little while ago, but if this screenshot were today, this would be showing just the metadata report for eLife's content from 2023, 2024, and the current months of 2025. So this is only a part of what eLife has registered because, of course, they have been registering content for a long time. So when you're only looking at current content, you're only looking at part of what they've registered. You can also see here that if you look on the left, there's a drop down that's set to show journal articles. This is only showing journal articles right now, but you can set it to look at preprints, at data sets, at conference papers, all kinds of things. And again, your score, as it were, for that item type will change. In the middle there, between the journal articles drop down and the current content drop down, is a search bar where you can actually look up a journal title. So say that you are a particular publisher and you publish more than one journal, you can get a prep score for each individual journal, not just for you as a publisher of multiple journals. And then one important thing to note too is that here are these little I figures. Those are informations. These will tell you about each of these metadata elements. And we're going to go over several of these and show you how to bump up your score, as it were, using OJS and sometimes using OJS plugins. So you can see here that one of the things this prep report is measuring is, hey, how many of these, nearly 12,000 journal articles registered by eLife in the last 2.25 years have a reference list? Well, 97% of them do. That's a great score. Same thing for abstracts, same things for how many of their content items have ORCID IDs, and so on. So we'll go through most of these. We're not going to talk about Crossmark or about text mining, license, or similarity check URLs, but we will go over some of these other metadata elements and show you how to improve your score on these Crossref prep reports. So here's a very basic introduction to how to send DOI metadata to Crossref using 3.3. Most of you are already doing this, but here's just a really, really brief introduction to how to do this in case you're not already doing this. OJS 3.3 requires 2 plugins to send DOI metadata to Crossref. And it's important to note too that you do need to be a Crossref member before you can do this. So you should set up your Crossref membership. PKP can sponsor you in certain conditions. You can look into that. But once you are a Crossref member, there are plugins within OJS that will help you send that DOI metadata to Crossref. One is called the OJS DOI plugin, which assigns DOIs to articles within OJS 3.3. The second one is called the Crossref XML export plugin, and that's the one that manages the sending of that metadata to Crossref. You can, of course, use other DOI registrars, and if you do that, you will need to use a different plugin. But assuming you are a Crossref member and that you want to register DOIs with Crossref using OJS 3.3, this is how you would do it. To enable the DOI plugin, you would go, you can do this as a journal manager or as a site administrator. Under settings, you would click website plugins. Under installed plugins, scroll down to the section labeled public identifier plugins, and then you will see a plugin just called DOI. And you can just enable that by clicking the checkbox. You can click the little blue arrow on the left to get to the settings, and then you can configure the settings. And essentially what you'll need to do is, this is how here's how you'll have to enter those settings. You'll have to enter things like your your Crossref account credentials and things like that. But once you have done that and configured that, and I won't go over this configuration in detail right now, you will need to enable a second plugin, which is the Crossref XML plugin. Similarly, you go to Settings, Website, Plugins, Installed Plugins, Import, Export Plugin. Make sure the checkbox is checked. Sometimes these look like they're grayed out, and that's fine. And then to configure the plugin, you would go to Tools, Crossref XML Export Plugin. And again, enter various options and settings in order to make that work. We do, by the way, have a couple of new videos about how to do this in much more detail. We have links to those that are within the slides. Perhaps somebody can share them as well. They're still really under construction, so they're not published, really on a public sharing, but we'd actually love feedback on those. So we are sharing those links with you. So there's one about how to register metadata with OJS 3.3. But if you are using 3.4, you only need one plugin. That's one of the major differences, at least from our perspective, between 3.3 and 3.4. DOI management is built in as a core function to OJS 3.4, but you do still need a plugin that is connected to a particular DOI registrar in order to deposit DOI metadata. The Crossref Manager plugin is the name of the one you would use with 3.4 to register DOIs and metadata with Crossref. So the process of enabling that is very similar. Scroll down to generic plugins, click the checkbox to enable it, and then you would need to configure it, go into settings and so on in order to make sure that it's working. But now let's talk about the meat of the matter. Once you've done that, once you've set up to register DOIs with Crossref, which most of you are, how do you improve your scores on your participation report? How do you enrich your metadata? How do you add and update specific metadata elements? So I want to make one distinction clear first. The following slides are going to show you how to add metadata for future articles using OJS plugins. But many of you probably have already been publishing content and you want to update the metadata for those already published articles. So in order to do that, what you need to do is enable and configure all the necessary plugins, as we're going to show you. Make sure you can do that, and then of course you can do that going forward. But then in order to update the metadata for existing articles, you'll need to find that article, unpublish it, add the missing metadata, being sure to save it, and then republish it. And once you do that, whether you're adding metadata for a new article or updating metadata on a previously published article, it can take up to 24 hours for that metadata to show up on your participation report. So it's not an immediate process, but it's quite quick. All right, so first let's talk about the element in prep reports called references. References are an option, and by the way, all of these particular slides are showing pretty much the same process for both OJS 3.3 and 3.4. All of these things are pretty much managed exactly the same, so it doesn't matter as much for these which version you have. So references are an option in OJS, and you can configure that by going to Workflow, Submission, Metadata References, and just enabling references metadata. And then you have an option of, do you want to get those references from the author? Do you want your editors to provide them later, or do you want to require the author to provide references? Once they're configured, you just have a nice text box where you enter what I would call a bibliography. You enter each reference on a line to produce a reference list. And that winds up looking, like this screenshot on the right. You just enter, you could maybe use a bibliographic software or something, perhaps get these from the author and just paste them into that nice text box. Now, you can do that, and that will be fine. But what we encourage you to do is also install and enable the Crossref reference linking plugin. And what that will do is enable automatic extraction of DOIs from the reference list. So it'll look up your references and say, hey, is there a DOI for this? It'll look up these references in the Crossref API, locate the DOIs, And then it also allows the display of reference lists on the article landing page, especially for, I think, people who have subscription content. I think it's really nice to show both an abstract and the reference list. That does help people, I think, decide whether or not to read it. So we encourage that Crossref reference linking plugin. Abstracts, another key element in those participation reports. Abstracts are an existing field in OJS. You can look at the abstract, going to publication, title, and abstract, and there's absolutely no plugin needed for this. So this is a very good thing to make sure that you have. And again, I think it's really important to researchers as a preview of whether or not they want to read the whole article. So now let's talk about 3 elements on the prep report all at once: ORCID IDs, affiliations, and ROR IDs. And all of these are related to what you might call author metadata or contributor metadata. Now, all of this metadata is pretty much managed. If you go to publication and then your contributors list, underneath each contributor, you have an edit button, and that's where you can edit this metadata. So in that edit screen, you can add all kinds of information about a contributor. And one of the things you can add is an ORCID ID. That's an existing field, so you could just copy and paste an ORCID ID in there. Nothing wrong with that, no plugin needed. However, there is a very nice, useful plugin called the ORCID Profile plugin that we encourage you to use. So you can enable and configure that in order to let contributors authenticate their ORCID ID. So with a field like that, you could put in pretty much anybody's ORCID ID and it wouldn't necessarily match the actual name of the person listed in the name fields. So with this plugin, you let contributors say, yes, in fact, that is my ORCID ID. And it also does a really nice display of those authenticated ORCID IDs on the article, and then lets readers of that article click through to that researcher's ORCID ID to learn important information about them. And then it can also, this plugin can enable these contributors to claim the article in their ORCID records. So ORCID records can become a nice almost CV of publications using features like this. So affiliations. Affiliations are also an existing field in both OJS 3.3 and 3.4. So this is just a text field. So, for instance, if I am a researcher at the University of Virginia, I can just type University of Virginia in here and save it. And that is an affiliation. It's a text string affiliation. That's great. It's in a slightly different place in 3.4, but it's still, you'll be easy to find it from that contributor edit screen. For those of you, so talking about ROR, for those of you who don't know what ROR is like ORCID, but for organizations instead of people. It's a global community-led registry of open persistent identifiers for research organizations, and it works in some ways very much like ORCID, although it's centrally curated rather than individually curated by the researchers. So there is a ROR plugin for OJS that you can install and enable. And what that will do is collect and display ROR IDs for author affiliations on article pages. So the example shown here is actually from an OPS installation. Much of what I'm saying about OJS does also apply to OPS, not everything, but most of it. So you can see here that for the contributors to this article, not only are the ORCID IDs given, but for 2 of the contributors here, there's a little ROR logo that is saying, that is linked to, in this case, Simon Fraser University and Stanford University. And ROR IDs are used very much like ORCID IDs in that they disambiguate institutions. So for instance, if I am affiliated with the University of Virginia and I just type in the University of Virginia and someone else is also affiliated with the University of Virginia but types in UVA, there's no way for systems to know that those are the 2 same ways of referring to the same organization. So ORCID is for disambiguation. I mean this John Walensky and not another one. And ROR is exactly the same for institutions. So it's very useful for machines in particular to be able to group entities together. So one slight piece of bad news is that in these current versions of OJS, ROR IDs are not being included in XML output, so you can't really right now improve your affiliations and ROR IDs score in the prep report. However, in OJS 3.5, which we're very much looking forward to, which is due out this year, affiliations and ROR IDs not only will be included in the OJS XML output, they will be core functions of 3.5. So once 3.5 comes out, we encourage you to upgrade to that, and then you can redeposit your metadata. And so if you do install these plugins, you'll have those ROR IDs, and then you can begin to send those through to Crossref. So the last type of metadata that we're going to talk about is funding metadata. Who funded this article? So again, this is managed by a plugin. There's a funding metadata plugin, and it's really two primary elements on the prep report that will show up if you install and enable this plugin. So you can add a funder once you've installed the plugin. And this allows you to add the funder name and then also a particular award number or grant number. So say that you got a particular grant from a particular funder, you can add the name, you can add the funder registry ID to unambiguously identify that funder, and you can add a number for the particular award that funded this research. Very useful information for a lot of consumers of this content. All right, so that's all from me. We are, oh good, we're doing pretty well on time. We're at 12:36. I see 46 things in the chat and lots of things in the questions. So what I'm gonna encourage you to do now, I'm actually gonna shut off the sharing, and we can just take this time, 20 minutes, to ask and answer questions. Work with your own installation right now, and we will answer your questions as we go. And I encourage you during this section as well, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question live, you can certainly do that instead of typing it in the chat or in the Q&A. 20 minutes of practice. We are here to help you.
Amanda, there is a question that maybe you would like to answer, and it's about a funder plugin.
Yep.
Would you like to address that?
What is the question? Where is it?
They want to know where they find that.
Oh, where do you find it?
Yeah.
So Mike Nason, I don't know if you might want to answer that. I suspect that you might need to be a site administrator to find and install that plugin. So there is a plugin gallery for OJS. It should be in there. Mike, oh, Mike can't talk. Let me see if we can allow. Yes, Mike says that it is in the plugin gallery. Let me go back here just for one sec. I will share you. Here, share again. Again, you will need to be a site administrator. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Oh, yes, right there. So here we are. If you are a site administrator, you will see this link on the left called administration, and then you will see a plugin gallery. There's far more plugins. I mean, this is just the top of the screen. You will scroll down somewhere, Control F to find the funder plugin in that gallery, and then you will need to install it and then enable it.
Yeah, I can speak. So after you enable the plugin in the plugin gallery, you can hop over to your installed plugins, just do a quick Control F for funding data, and you'll turn it on. And then the funding data actually leverages the Crossref funder registry, so it'll do like autocomplete. And so when an author's filling out metadata, they can get a little text form, and as they start to type out whoever the funder is, it'll autocomplete to what it's supposed to be. They can enter the grant ID, and in they go. We have had, thanks to the more recent announcement of ROR sort of being the bedrock of the funder registry, we've been having conversations about how to better incorporate that, probably moving forward in 3.6, because 3.5 is due. If 3.5 was a pregnant woman, she'd be ready to pop. So 3.6 is probably what we'll be talking about. And then the section of plugins is just generic. It should be near the top of your generic plugins list in your install plugins.
And again, you can kind of see on this screenshot here, there's two tabs. There's plugin gallery and installed plugins. And I show a little bit of the installed plugins somewhere here.
Amanda, we can just see your slides right now.
Oh,
We're
I'm
not
sorry.
seeing-
Hang on.
Yeah.
I'm on the wrong screen. I shared the wrong screen. Whoop, doop, doop, doop. Here we go. So here is another screenshot. This is about enabling the DOI plugin. But again, here you can see that there's both the plugin gallery and the installed plugins. So you need to be a site administrator. You go to the plugin gallery, you find the funding plugin, you install it, and then it will show up in installed plugins and you can enable it. So it's a two-step process, install and enable. Okay. Other questions to answer live? Take a look at the Q&A here. Sometimes I do see something in the Q&A about just having difficulty assigning DOIs. Sometimes it is true. This is a very generic overview. Sometimes there are very precise and unique problems that maybe have a simple solution, but it's hard to figure out. So I do want to emphasize again that PKP's community forum is a wonderful resource. I think we've shared a link to that in the chat. And then Crossref's community forum is also a wonderful resource. So I highly encourage asking those questions there. I see a question from Ivo on, is there any convention on managing partial ORCIDs? In some cases, only some of the authors confirm their ORCIDs. As best as I know, that's not a problem. I don't think it would prevent publication. And in fact, on the slide I showed, only two of the, only some of the authors have verified ORCID IDs. So, if an author doesn't confirm their ORCID, or in some cases, if they don't have it, that should be fine. You can just have verified ORCIDs for some of your authors.
I might just, there's a question in the chat here about getting errors where they've got like author metadata, but they still get an error when they deposit. If you're depositing multilingual metadata, like if your journal has more than one language, make sure that your metadata, especially if your journal, like let's say your journal's set up as a French journal, but you've got English metadata. The primary locale, if it isn't filled out, sometimes you can run into a problem where it'll say you don't have author information included because it's looking at the English language metadata for the author because it's your default language of your journal. So just a heads up when you're doing multilingual metadata, you're gonna, the likelihood of running into problems kind of goes up a little bit just because of the complexity of multilingual metadata. And as I wrote in a couple chats too, and in the documentation, if this comes up and you're just sort of stumped, by all means hop over to the forum. I very regularly get asked. We have PKP staff who monitor our forum, and if there's a Crossref question that nobody wants to try to answer, they will make me do it. So I'm always happy to help.
I'll just mention too, I don't know if this is high priority, but I do see a couple of things in the chat about from people who don't know what their version is. And so I wanted to just show you how to find what your version is. Again, there's a number of ways to do this. This is my own test journal running OJS. If I want to find what version it is, I have this administration link down here in the bottom left. So I can click on that. and view system information. And we can see that I am using 3.4.08. I can check for updates here. Now again, I do have to have this site administrator privileges. This has all kinds of great system information about it. I will say the other thing that I do occasionally, which is a bit sneakier, is that if I go to the front of my test journal and look at the source, I think this should work. You can see here that it gives the version that I am using of OJS. So this is, again, just different browsers do this different ways. I'm using Firefox, but I look and I view the page source. And there it is. So both of those are good ways to find out your version. Any other questions we should answer live?
I'm seeing a question in the chat here about a participation report showing 0% references. It could be, if you don't have it configured, that there's a Crossref reference linking plugin that needs to be enabled. And in your article metadata, you need to have configured references as a metadata field that gets populated. So that's kind of a two-step process. It can be sort of easy to mix that. So I might double check those two places. So that's your metadata settings and your plugins to make sure those two things are configured.
Yeah, we have, I don't know if others who have checked their references score or know that they're depositing references in Crossref could speak to this. I haven't tried to do this myself, so I'm not certain, but I do know that it's a kind of a two-step process. So the first thing you need to do is go into your workflow settings and make sure that you're enabling references metadata, right? So you do need to do this for sure in order to do that. And then once you have done this and entered the references, installing and enabling this Crossref reference linking plugin. I'm not showing the configuration settings here, but I think those configuration settings might need to be closely examined to make sure that those references are going through to Crossref.
There's another question here about unpublishing and republishing articles to change metadata, which is like such a profoundly common way for people to do this, especially since the way this is supposed to work in OJS is that any change is supposed to require a new version, which is why they don't encourage you to unpublish and republish. And when you publish a new version of the work, then it just sort of catches everything at once. But lots of people don't feel like a metadata edit needs to be a whole new version, so they just unpublish really quick and they republish. And the question here is specifically about the original issue or article publication date. So you can make sure that you set, so in the issue level settings, there's an ability to make sure that your issue date is not the date that gets written to all of the articles within it. So there's like, you can kind of flag which is the primary date. And if that's turned off and you make a modification to your article publication date, it should be maintained when you save your metadata. But if the issue date is overriding it, then you might have trouble. But I think you can edit the date on one of those metadata pages. It's like I wish I could remember the name of it off the top of my head. Hold on. Now I'm just looking because I got OJS open.
Let me share my, I'll share my OJS instance again. If I can find it. Here. And again, this is 3.4. So happy to go anywhere you direct me to, Mike.
Yeah. So do you have an active article somewhere? A published article somewhere?
Yeah, this one. This is the only one. I only have one.
It's your only one. Okay. Okay, great. Can you go to publication?
Yep.
Publication tab.
Yep.
And then go to issue. It's on the left-hand side near the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So here's where it says what issue it was published in. And at the bottom, you'll see this phrase where it says date published. The publication date will be set automatically when the issue is published. Don't enter a publication date here unless the article was previously published elsewhere or you need to backdate it. So if you had to make a change to the publication date that was not the same as the issue publication date, this is where you would do it.
Great. Yeah, a lot of, I mean, this publication metadata tab is a good place to be. Here's your contributors. Here's where you can edit a lot of that contributor information. I have my Roar plugin installed, so I can search for, oops. Boom. Oops. Any other questions we should answer live? We do have another 10 minutes. Happy to do a bit more troubleshooting. Let me look at the Q&A here. Right, so Parestico, I think we just answered your question. Kathleen is answering questions. Again, I didn't really go through the DOI settings, but making sure that your credentials are correct is a key thing to do.
I'll speak a little bit since Amanda's dog is very interested in participating in the webinar. There is one question. It looks like somebody's having problems with registration using the plugin, and they're wondering if it has to do with registering in Spanish. Mike, I'm guessing that that shouldn't be a problem, but I don't know, maybe that's something they could take to the community forum or to your support.
Yeah. That would be a great forum post, and just include like screenshots of what your metadata looks like, and we can help you work it out. It shouldn't be an issue. OJS is very good with multilingual metadata, or with like, hard to explain. It's good at supporting multiple languages, and it is good at multilingual metadata. But sometimes there is a complication in the expectations of what the plugin is looking for when you've got more than one language at once. But we have a huge volume of Spanish users who use Crossref plugins successfully. So I doubt it is Spanish specific, but it could be more of a yes and situation or a no and situation. Also, Kathleen answered a question right below that, but it is probably my favorite question. It is the question about trying to use the plugin and then seeing an error that says 401 unauthorized. If you see this error, your user credentials have been entered into the plugin wrong. And this could be one of two things. One is this email address and role issue. So you would have your email address and then a slash, and then the role is provided to you by Crossref. It's not uncommon for people to miss the setting because it's not normal to think about putting your username and then like a slash and something else in your username field. The other one is that the password field, if you are copying and pasting your password from something, it is exceedingly common for people to accidentally include a white space on either side of that password and then wonder why things don't work. Just double check to make sure that when you're copying your password and you're copying it in as it is written, and not including any extra characters on either side. I've definitely had to go back and forth with lots of people, asking them if they can first log in. And this is always a good sanity check. Hop over to doi.crossref.org and try to log in as a member with your credentials. And if they work and you know your credentials are correct, then put those credentials into the Crossref plugin in OJS, just to confirm that you both know what your credentials are and they work, and then that you've got them handy to paste them in.
Well, thank you, Mike. Yeah, that's a super common ticket that we get over in support here about that 401 unauthorized. Happens a lot.
Can you all see my slides about configuring the Crossref XML plugin?
I see a photo of cows.
Oh dear, yeah. Wrong window. Sorry. So professional.
And I like it. It's nice.
Yeah, it's calming.
Here we are. Sorry, wrong window. Configuring the Crossref XML plugin. Yes. There are a lot of slides in this slide deck that we didn't go over, but yes, here is what we talked about that 401 error. So this, I don't know if this is exclusive to 3.3, but certainly if you are using 3.3, this is really important. So notice on this screen that you need to enter a depositor name and a depositor email, but you do also need to use the correct username and password available from Crossref. So there is very helpful help text in here. You know, again, you can write support@crossref.org and get the exact right credentials if you don't know them. But when you joined Crossref, you should have gotten an email with these credentials. I believe that's correct, if that's right.
Amanda, we have a great question about participation reports here, and I would like the person saying that they have way less registered items than the DOIs they've registered in published articles. And my guess is what's happening is that the participation reports default to a more current view, showing you the last few years, and you can switch it to show you lifetime. It's on the right hand side there. You can pick between lifetime or more recent views. That would be my guess as to what's happening.
Yes, I believe that's true. I will share my screen again. We will do a live demo. I told myself I wouldn't do a live demo, but I can't resist. So here we will take a look at this. Selected the correct. So here again, this is the live participation report for eLife Sciences. And yes, this is really crucial. This is showing only current content. So that is content within, it's from 2023, 2024, and what's the current months of 2025. So if I flip this to all time, you will see all of their content. So older content has slightly lower scores. And then back file is everything except the current months of 2025, 2024, and 2023. So current content basically means content from the most recent 3 calendar years. The other key thing that might not be showing all of your content is this. There are certain content types, right? So you want to make sure you you have the correct content type selected because that's going to change what your score is. Does that help?
Yes, that was great. I was typing the answer and then gonna ask if Mike is on it right away. Yeah, it's a very common mistake. We'd love to change that because it's confusing when we understand.
Well, I'm glad, Felipe, that you will not have to go through all those publications again. Yes, I'm very glad to hear that. Great. We have 3 more minutes. I'm glad that we did have a lot of time for chat and explication. I did want to reiterate that we are going to send this recording out. It will be a public recording, so you will have access to it. And as I mentioned, we have more sort of, I suppose, fancy. We have more fancy tutorials on how to do this in progress. And we're happy to share those with you. What else can we answer live for you before we take off?
Oh, this question, Binjang on the chat has the error is a DOI has not been assigned to this publication. So that just means the DOI was never registered with the agency with which you were registering DOIs, be it Crossref or DataCite or whatever. I see people send me this error a lot, and they say, "Why didn't it do the thing?" And it just means it never did it. The registration has not been successfully done. One thing that's really important, I think, for people to know, and I this is happening less and less, is that and maybe this is obvious. In order to register a DOI, you need to have a membership with the organization and a prefix and all of this other stuff. For a very long time, people would send me messages saying, I set up this plugin and none of my DOIs work. And then I would ask them about their Crossref membership, and they would tell me that they did not have one. So you need that piece for this stuff to work.
Yeah, and that I mentioned that, I alluded to that, but I don't think we shared the link. Again, let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen here. But we do have, here we go. So this is PKP documentation. PKP can sponsor certain organizations. So that's a really, really useful program to look into. But just in general, actually, I don't know if I don't actually often share this link, but so I'm not sure where it is. But if you want to join Crossref, here is information about joining Crossref, and you do need to do that before you can, before any of these plugins will really work, before you can. But most of you, I know, in the registration did give us your DOI prefix, so you know that you are already members. But yes, if you are not, there is information about how to do that. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank you, Mike, for jumping in as a webinar co-host, even though I did not ask you to do that. But it was great to hear your voice, your extremely knowledgeable voice, answering all these questions. And again, I just want to reiterate, I will share my screen one last time, just so that you can see all of our help emails. We will share this recording. We will send it out. If I can, we will share the slides as well. Here are some links to further help, documentation about Crossref, our community forum at community@crossref.org, contacting the team directly. Kathleen also told you can just write support@crossref.org. Kathleen and others will monitor that email. We do have an upcoming community call. We'd love to have you join that. This, when I say we, I mean Crossref. Whoops. And then you can also follow Crossref anywhere on our social media. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. Thank you for joining. Thanks again to Kathleen and Rosa and Mike in particular, and Arlie for being here and answering questions.
Thanks all.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye. Very well done, Matt. Everybody. And Mike, where is Mike?
Oh, I think Mike left. He probably has another. Oh, someone is asking about support for Mastodon. I honestly don't know.
Would we have something, don't we, Rosa?
Oops, Rosa, I think you're muted.
Apologies, I'm muted. Support for Mastodon in what way? Just
So like instead of Twitter, like using Mastodon for like questions, because I think we have. Do we have a presence there?
absolutely. Okay, so we have a link tree. Let me just share that just a moment with all of our communication channels. But you could ask questions on our community forum. Contact us on the website. But here, I'll put this link tree in here, and you can, all of these ways in which you can chat with us. Oh, wrong, hang on, let me get this to everybody. Apologies. Let's do this. How's that? Okay. One more question in the chat.
Let's see. Didn't I enter this? Oh, yeah, so Luis, yeah, I think we have answered your question. It looks like you are trying to know how to check your prep report, and the key thing is to go to this link, crossref.org/members-prep, and then search for your organization. So whoever the publishing organization is, that's what you would search for.
So thank you, Amanda. I was
Yep.
trying to figure out what that question was. I did
Yep.
not understand.
Best I can tell. At least the last one. I don't know the first two, but he does have Luis, you do have a DOI prefix, so presumably you are a Crossref member.
Yeah, I can pull that up right now, and I can find your member ID for you quickly.
Nice.
Should help. Like Amanda said, you can search by your search by your name, but here's your member ID if that helps.
And I'm just noticing a question in the chat from Bin Zhang about problems with DOIs. DOIs for published articles are not automatically assigned. Yeah, Ben, if you have sort of very specific issues, again, asking either OJS or Crossref we're happy to help. It is worth noticing that automatic assignment of DOIs, and I don't know if this is your question, but automatic assignment of DOIs is an option in OJS. So some people want to have DOIs automatically assigned, and some people do not. So it just sort of depends on your preferences, which one you would like to have. So yeah. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to end the meeting.
All right, thank you so much, Amanda. Great job.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.